Hi, I'm Judy Farrell, and this is the Chai Sessions, my podcast for Merchant City Yoga, where I talk with yoga pals old and new, trying to understand better what it is we're doing when we practice yoga and why we do it. This episode's the third in my short series, Ashtanga Love Notes, where I talk with friends who, like me, still practice and teach Ashtanga and still love it too. I feel Ashtanga's fallen a bit out of fashion and gets a bit of a bad rep for being too difficult, too rigid, and well, old-fashioned. But we'll talk about what we love, what keeps us coming back, and what challenges and highlights it's brought us along the way. Imagine these love notes handwritten and held close to my heart. And so to my guest on this episode, friend and fellow Glasgow teacher Cathy Moran. I first met Cathy around 2006 when she was visiting Glasgow and was looking for an Ashtanga community. What she hadn't realised was how really small that community was back then. Cathy had been practising yoga since 1999 before discovering the magic of a regular Ashtanga practice on a trip to Yoga Plus in Crete in 2002. Living in London at the time, Hamish Henry at Ashtanga Yoga London became her regular teacher. She moved here to Glasgow in 2007 and started to teach Ashtanga. Cathy made her first trip to Mysore in southern India in 2008 and has since returned regularly for extended periods of study and practice with her late teacher Sharat Joyce. She received his Level 2 authorisation in 2014. Cathy's the owner of Ashtanga Yoga Glasgow, which was born out of her desire to share the traditional Mysore method of Ashtanga Yoga. She established Glasgow's first morning Mysore self-practice programme and continues to teach, share and pass this method on to others as it was taught to her. Now, I hadn't seen Cathy for ages, so was really excited when she agreed to join me in person for a chat. And we start by talking about how people are looking for different things from their yoga practice. Some folk want to do some yoga now and then, and others want to dive deep and learn everything about it. She says, I just take people as they come. And if they show more of an interest, I'll say come to Mysore style class because you really get to spend time on stuff that you need to spend time on. You get to really understand yourself, what your shortcomings are, and what your skill set is in terms of your physical ability. And you get to practice in a meditative way where the class is quiet. Cathy shares her journey into Ashtanga Yoga and how she got to a place in her physical practice where she was able to do things she never thought possible. She talks about how she's no longer able to do some of those things now, and also has chosen to stop doing some of them, although she still can, because she doesn't feel the need to. As she says, things change, and it's about doing the thing that benefits your body rather than the end picture. We talk about those early alarms for getting up to practice and teach, and how it doesn't come naturally. About how having a discipline to follow builds something in you, and then having put in the hours you become more self-reliant and can make better informed decisions. And we also talk about how she's had to learn to let go of the morning ritual of practice and simply practice when she can. This love note was so much fun to record, and chatting with Cathy really took me back. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. Cathy, thank you so much for coming in and joining me on the Chai Session. We have our trusty cuppas here. And it's so lovely to do it in person. I feel like it's ages since I've seen you.
No, it's been ages since I've been here, actually. Even in Merchant City, it's really
into
bizarre.
the city centre, the big smoke. You'll see a difference in it. So, like I said, we were chatting before, and this is a little series of podcasts I'm doing called Ashtanga Love Notes, where I am catching up and geeking out with fellow Ashtanga enthusiasts. So people like me who are still practicing and still teaching Ashtanga, even though sometimes it does feel maybe a little bit out of fashion these days. So I thought I'd kick the conversation off by asking, what do you say? So if someone comes to you and they don't really know anything about Ashtanga, what do you say to them? Because I still find that quite difficult. It's like, how much is too much information? So you want to kind of give them the essence.
I think I just say that it's quite a dynamic form of yoga. You follow a set sequence, synchronized with the breath. You build on what you learn. So you take it step by step, you build on what you learn. So it enables you to work at a steady pace and make proper progress, you know. But I mean, it depends who you're talking to. Is it somebody who already knows about yoga,
Right.
and is familiar with Ashtanga but doesn't really know much about it, or is it someone who doesn't really know anything about yoga at all? I mean, it just depends, doesn't it? Because a lot of people will know about Ashtanga, but not the details, or not really. I've heard of it, or they think they've done it, but they're not sure. Kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that happens quite a lot, doesn't it, when people come to class and you ask if maybe they've done some Ashtanga before, and their answer is like, yeah, I know it. I think so.
Yeah, or they know, or yeah, I'm familiar with it, and then the class starts and they're not.
No, quite clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, or you'll get somebody who comes to Mysore and they have no idea what they're doing, because I think they didn't really realise it was actually self-practice, but you know, there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'll tell them it's, like you follow, basically it's a set sequence, that's the main thing, you know, and you work progressively, so you're doing a lot of groundwork repetitively in order to get used to certain movements that your body might not be ready to do immediately.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's one of the kind of the misconceptions that I hear quite a lot about Ashtanga or misunderstandings is probably a better word, like around the fact that it's a set sequence and it's either rigid or boring, or both. What would you say to that?
Well,
what
I
are your
think
thoughts about that?
I think it's not, you know, like different strokes for different folks. You know, like some people want to do something different each time, and I think the difference is a lot of the time is to do with someone who wants to approach the yoga as a practice that they're going to make a lifestyle change and really commit to, as opposed to someone who wants to do a fun exercise class.
Yes.
Because you do get that. There'll be people who are busy and they've got their own practices with maybe other things that they do, and they're not really, their aim is not to come and take on this whole thing, Ashtanga practice that they have to commit to. That's not their aim, but they want to do a bit of yoga every now and again in conjunction with all the other stuff, whether it's different spiritual practices or physical practices or sports or other things that they do. They recognise that they want to do a bit of yoga, they enjoy it, but they don't want to commit deeply. And so that's going to be, they won't want to do that whole like build on it slowly, do practice every day, because if you're in that situation, you're not going to have the inclination all the time even to do that.
Yes.
You know, so it's just it's a different approach. And if you're physically fit and you've done sort of some styles of yoga and other kind of exercise before, and you're very body aware, you'll have no problem joining a led class and just doing it, you know, and feeling good afterwards. And sometimes that's all that people want, and that's fine. You know.
Yeah.
But if you're going to sort of adopt it, but other times people really want to get into it and want to learn everything about it and want to understand how it works, and they want to understand the philosophy behind it, they want to dig a bit deeper and do all the different practices, you know, and they're committed to that, and you can, or they've got an interest in it and then they might become committed or they might not, you know.
And so how do you approach those different, like people looking for a different thing from class, like how do you approach that, and how do you adapt your teaching in response to that, and perhaps even differing abilities?
I just take people as they come, and I do what I do, and they can do what they like with it, you know. So I don't want to put people off. So I will welcome anybody who's capable of doing whatever class they want to do, and then if they show more of an interest, I'll say, obviously, if you want to do this properly, the best way to do it is to come to my thought classes, because you get to really spend time on stuff that you need to spend time on, and you get to really understand yourself, and you know what your shortcomings and your skills set is, you know, in terms of your physical ability, and you get to practice in a meditative way where the class is quiet. And so I think you just go a bit deeper doing that. So if somebody is looking for that, then that's what I would recommend. And I always recommend that they do, if they do have that interest, to give it a good shot, like do a month and come several times a week if possible. And if that's not possible, come once a week definitely, and try and do some more at home.
It's that consistency, isn't it?
It's consistency. It's definitely quality and quantity, actually, but not doing too much in one go, but doing it consistently. And
because that can happen as well, can't it? Like people get really overexcited and jump right in and end up doing too much, knackering themselves or hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And then getting just really disheartened.
Or just jumping into a class, really throwing themselves into it, and then not being able to walk up the stairs the next day, and just kind of like, or hurting their shoulder or something, a little bit twinging their shoulders, and just thinking, this isn't for me, it's too much. But it's like, that's not how you're supposed to practice it, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Because there is this perception with probably all of the stronger, more dynamic styles of yoga, is that you're supposed to be able to do all these spectacular postures. And I think there's definitely like something about helping people understand that actually, like, trusting the yoga, it doesn't matter what it looks like, but trusting that that's it. And even to a point where it might not matter so much what we as teachers are saying either. It's just encouraging and supporting, and
it's encouraging self-sufficiency and understanding your own body and all the layers of yourself ultimately. But I mean, it's not it's funny to have this conversation, because you know that you feel that you've had this conversation so many times over so many different eras, and it keeps coming back again, kind of thing. But you know, it's that thing. It's not really about the postures, is it? It's about coming in and doing it and understanding in your body. And it's not about the level of. The thing about Ashtanga is some of the postures are very, very, very difficult. Yeah. And it's the feeling like, oh, but I'll never be able to do that. It doesn't really matter. And what I often say to people is, I've got to play. I mean, I'm not particularly talented physically, and I've got to a place where I've done things that I didn't think I'd be able to do on a physical level.
Yes.
But now I'm older, I'm stiffer, I can't do those same things. I've stopped doing a lot of things because I don't see the need for it for my body at this present moment in time.
Yeah.
So it's not like I know I can do it or I have been able to do it. So that's not the goal, and it's trying to explain that to people.
And I think that's interesting, you know, because as someone who's been practicing and teaching way longer than I have, like I would say the same. It's like there are things I used to be able to do, but some I choose not to do anymore, and some I'm actually not able to do anymore just because of injury and you know, different body. Not to say that's still not really frustrating, even though I know it's not about the postures.
Yeah.
And then
I don't necessarily find it even frustrating.
I'm still struggling. Yeah.
You know, I don't, because
with I used to be able to.
No, I don't. Do you know? I think for me, So I'll use an example because it makes it
please.
much more easy to explain. Kapotasana. Okay.
So it's either going to be Kapotasana or Dvipada.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those two.
It could be both. Could be both of them. So Kapotasana, obviously you go, you catch your ankles. I used to do that. No, I'm not. It's not easy. It's never easy. That's always a hard
never been easy.
posture. But it was one that I could always do. Mm-hmm. It's always a struggle. You always have to concentrate. There are, it's not pleasant.
But most days it was.
But you can do it. I could do it.
It was there for you. Yeah.
Now I don't catch my ankles, but I have no desire to, because when I go to do it, I put my hands on the floor, I push, and I feel like I'm at my maximum stretch, and I feel like I'm getting what I'm supposed to be getting out of that posture. Yeah. And it would be just, if I would try to get my ankles at this point on my own, I could maybe do it with help, but on my own, what's the point? I'm risking in hurting my back.
Yeah.
I'm not at my shoulder because of various injuries and stiffness.
And we could probably spend the entire time comparing injuries.
and I just don't. What I'm doing, I do try. Like, I put effort into the posture. I just don't go to the place that I used to go. But I've got absolutely no desire to do that. For me, I don't have that thing. I don't know. Yeah. I think I've always been like, I've not been a really high achiever in terms of postures.
Yeah, maybe that's where I'm going wrong.
So it doesn't really bother me, but it's definitely very clear that there's certain things that is harder to do now. Yes. And it doesn't make sense to push yourself to do it because it's not about that. And in the same way, there are certain things that you're going to find harder than maybe the person next to you. And maybe that specific kind of posture or movement or action or coordination in your body is not going to come easily to you. So it's not about doing the end product. It's about doing the thing that benefits your body or gives you the feeling of that posture in the safest and most productive way possible. It's not about the end picture. That's just silly.
The Instagram shot.
No, yeah. That's just asking to get injured. And I would definitely, that's how I would teach as well.
Yeah. So this might be quite a nice point to then go back and ask, what brought you to yoga? Like, how did you find yourself practicing Ashtanga, or why?
So I
don't know that I've ever asked you this.
Oh. Well, I don't know. I think I was living in London, probably late 90s, and I was interested in doing yoga. I'd heard many times about people doing yoga. Yeah. Actually, I did one yoga class when I was in Edinburgh. I went to university briefly in Edinburgh.
Is that perhaps another story for another day?
Maybe. So I was living in Edinburgh and went to this yoga class when I was about 19 or 20. And it was kind of somewhere near the meadows, and it had a big window looking out onto the outside. And I went to this class, and it was full of, this was like 1990 or something, 91, something like that. And it was full of kind of ladies in leotards, like leotards a nice high, and
like a nice high cut.
Yeah. And I was only about 19, 20, and everybody seemed quite old. They were probably only about 30, 35 or whatever. But at the time I remember them, I felt quite young and I didn't really fit in. And I wasn't 100% comfortable. And I do remember her talking a lot about feet, and everyone was barefoot, and there was a lot of foot conversation, foot instruction. And then at the end, we all had to lie down, and she turned the lights out, and I felt really uncomfortable. I was like, "What? Why are we turning the lights out? This is really odd." And then there were these kids outside, and they were all looking through the glass window at us. God. And we could hear them all going, "What are they doing? Why are they going to sleep in there?" And I just found this really funny. And then that was that, and I left. And I didn't really enjoy the class. I didn't feel like I fit in. I wasn't quite sure about it, but I do remember feeling great afterwards. I felt really
Right.
light, and I felt really kind of just light and clear and clean. And I remember thinking, oh, I feel great. You know, maybe I'll come back, but I never did.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like it that much to come back. I don't know. I did like it, but it's kind of the memory of it stayed with me. And then I never did it again for about another 10 years. And that was when I lived in London. And I'd kind of heard about yoga here and there throughout my life and just thought, yeah, I think I want to try it. And I just went along to, there was a studio near me in Stoke Newington that had opened up. And it was literally 5 minutes from my house. So
Right.
I went there and just started going to a few different classes. And then I tried Ashtanga because I like the description of it. I was someone that I used to do a lot of exercise. I used to go running and go to the gym and jump on my bike and cycle everywhere.
Oh, okay.
So I like the idea of doing something quite active within the yoga. So I did some Ashtanga courses, and a couple of different ones. And there was this one man that he did like a 6-week beginner's course, and all we did in the whole 6 weeks was sun salutations.
Oh, that's
and,
very
and,
old
and I did
school,
it
isn't
twice. And after I completed 2 of these, and I couldn't do chaturanga properly, and that's why I had to do it twice.
it? Right. Wow.
So he was really strict about being able to do it properly before we moved on. But I must say I was a bit bored by the end of it.
12 weeks of Surya Namaskar.
Yeah. And then I sort of...
That's a lot.
Yeah. So then I kind of veered off and went to some different teachers, and I went to some different yoga centres and had some interesting teachers who did like an amalgamation of different styles.
Okay.
And then I came back to Ashtanga. I can't remember exactly. It was a long time ago. I can't remember exactly how and why, but I just kept coming back to Ashtanga because I somehow kept circling back. And then I went to this one class where they did the chant and they did the full primary series. And I'd never done that before. And I was really taken aback. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening? We're doing this again. We're doing that again. We're going down again, up again, back again, backwards, forward. I was going left when everyone was going right. And I just didn't know what was going on, but I loved it. And then that was me. That was when I was like, right, I need to do Ashtanga yoga because I just really liked it. I liked how I felt afterwards. I liked what felt like the complexity of it, but I liked the way that you were breathing and moving and breathing and moving. The chant, everything. I don't know why, but I liked it. And so then I just started doing Ashtanga. And then I went to Crete, to Yoga Plus in Crete, where we did Mysore practice there. And I had another teacher in my local yoga centre that was doing Mysore, but only in the summertime. So I had like a bit of a taste of Mysore, but never did it properly. There was the place in town, Hamish's place, which I think was John Scott still at the time.
Right.
Then Hamish took it over. But I remember hearing about it, and I Google it a lot. Did we have Google then? Probably. I don't know.
Oh,
I looked it up. I looked it up anyway, and I read that there was a waiting list, and you had to go on the waiting list, and it was quite far away from my house.
Okay.
Like I would have to cycle, or for half an hour or something. And for me, I wasn't an early morning person. The idea of doing that at 6 a.m. before work, I couldn't get my head around it. But I did keep going back to it and looking. So I didn't go that far, but I was doing kind of Mysore practice here and there where I could find it, and sort of gradually got into it that way. And then I went to Crete and did it there in Yoga Plus and loved it. I loved the sweatiness, the sweat pouring off you, the kind of like going to the next room, dragging your mat to the next room to do your finishing postures all covered in sweat and feeling like you were kind of light as air afterwards. I loved all that. And so then I was like, okay, Mysore. So it was a very slow process for me. This was over a period of about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
And then when I got back from there, I eventually went to this place called Yoga Place, I think it was called, a yoga centre in Bethnal Green. And there was a teacher there called Alex Medin, and he was a
Oh,
certified teacher, and he
Yeah.
taught there. And I started going there, and Bethnal Green wasn't as far as town. It was
Right.
still sort of more my neck of the woods, but it was still a bit far. It was still an effort. I remember setting my alarm for 5 o'clock every day for, I am not kidding, I remember this very well, for about 5 weeks.
Before you actually need it.
Yeah, and in the end I was like, I've got to stop doing this, because every day I was waking up and going, I can't do it, and going back to sleep at 5 o'clock. And eventually I was like ready to tear my hair out. I've either got to go or just stop setting the alarm, just go.
Yeah.
And I went, and it was funny because the day I went, it happened to be Alex was away in Mysore, and there was his replacement teacher, and it was his last day, and it was, oh God, I've forgotten his name now. He's quite famous, not famous, but famous within the Ashtanga community, based in New Zealand or Australia. Oh my
It'll
God.
come back to you. We'll keep chatting and it will pop
Yeah.
back.
Anyway, he was covering, and it was really busy. Like the whole place was absolutely jam packed because he was like a known teacher, and he'd been there for 5 weeks. And it was his last day.
The 5 weeks that you'd been setting your
Yes.
alarm.
And it was
And not
just
getting up.
that, and I was there for the last week of him being there, or the last day. I think maybe I had 2 days. And he was amazing, and I loved it. And then I was like, right, that's me now, I'm going to come. And then I started going to Mysore, and that was that Mysore practice in Bethnal Green. And then about a year or two later, I think the teachers changed, and Alex left, and then there was a couple of other teachers, and then at some point I changed and I went to Hamish Hendry's Shala, Ashtanga Yoga London, and then I was there until I moved to Scotland, and then that was that. So I've been practicing for about 8 years or so, doing yoga, generally yoga, mostly Ashtanga, and I've been doing sort of a Mysore practice for about maybe 3 or 4 years before I moved to Scotland, something like that. Yeah, I don't know, I can't remember.
Moved
20
here,
years ago.
Moved here and there was nothing like that up here.
And I moved here and there's nothing. No, this was the weirdest thing. So I moved. So there are all these different places where you could do Mysore. And once you get into that community, everyone's talking about it. And when I went to Crete that first time, I remember this girl was saying to me, do you practice on a moon day? And I was like, what's she talking about? Well, yeah, I don't know. Because I hadn't really been to those sort of places before. And, you know, and then you start going and everyone's talking about going to Mysore and bringing back Mysore rugs and all this kind of chat.
It's a different language, isn't it?
Yeah, you start to familiarise yourself with. Anyway, there was loads of different places you could go in London, and I came up, my parents lived in Glasgow, and I came up to visit, and usually I wouldn't come for very long, so I'd stay for 2 nights and go home again. But on this particular occasion, I was here for 5 days, so... You know, I needed to find somewhere to practice. I thought, it's the biggest city in Scotland. I'm going to look up all these places on the internet. And I couldn't find anywhere. And I kept thinking I'm not very tech savvy, and I kept thinking I'm doing something wrong. Why can't I find the place that does Ashtanga? And I eventually...
Couldn't comprehend that there wasn't.
I don't know, it didn't occur to me because there was just so many places in London. It just didn't occur to me. And then I found this finally one place, the Chi Yoga Centre, and they had a group that were doing
a self-practice.
A self-practice.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'll go to this. And I turned up and there was literally like 3 people in this really big room, and like it was a bit strange, you know, it wasn't like, and I thought, oh well, that's so odd, there's no Ashtanga here. Anyway, I ended up moving here about a year after that. About a year after that. And then I came back to Chi Yoga because there was like the full primary series on a Thursday and a Sunday, and with Alison and June.
Yeah, because the first time you came back, I think, so June's class would have been the only Ashtanga class.
Yeah.
In Glasgow that Thursday night, like primary, and then by the time you came back, Alison had added
The
so we
Sunday.
had just done our teacher training, and Alison had
That's right.
started the
Yeah.
Sunday-led primary.
Yeah.
And then, am I right in thinking, did you introduce the first morning Mysore class? in
No,
Glasgow?
Alison did.
Or was it Alison? I couldn't.
Well,
I couldn't remember whether it was you, Alison, or Siobhan.
I think Siobhan might have done
Which
some
came first? Because I remember
Mysore.
each of you doing a day.
Yeah.
I just can't remember.
Well, I remember
Who was
coming
first?
to Glasgow and going to Jerry Keelty's
Yes.
class,
Yes.
and I would cycle from Newton Mearns, where my mum lives, all the way to the West End, and do this class at like 8 o'clock at night or something, and then cycle all the way back. It was exhausting.
That's a long cycle.
I know, but I quite like that class, and I was chatting to him, and I remember him saying, "Oh, Siobhan is the Ashtanga person," because he told me the whole story that he used to do Ashtanga and he doesn't anymore,
Yeah,
and he knew
yeah.
Hamish, and I remember him saying that, and I didn't know who Siobhan was, and I met her afterwards. So I think she might have done some classes,
Was
but
she
I
maybe first?
but
Because I think in my
Not
head it
all.
all happened around about the same time.
yeah, I don't know what she'd done before. You know, I knew her, so I think she'd done some sort of classes before. And then Siobhan had a little studio in St George's Cross,
Yeah.
and she was definitely doing Mysore there.
Yeah.
And Alison was teaching it. I think
Yeah.
that's what it. I think
Yeah.
that's what it was. Like Alison taught it. Maybe not every day though. I think it was
I think
maybe
it was only
twice a week.
I was going to say I think it was only once or twice a week.
Yeah. And then when Alison left, I took it over. Or did
Did
you? I don't know. I can't remember.
I can't remember. I think did we do it between us?
I think we did it between us maybe.
Maybe.
And then you couldn't do it, so I ended up doing it or
Yeah,
something like that.
The day job got in the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
was something like that.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was just like once a week or twice a week
Yeah.
in the morning. And then it took me a while to do, and then when I did my own class later on, it took me a while to add another day in,
Yeah.
you know, and then it, you know.
I
'cause
mean,
you
the early
do-
morning, I was just having this conversation with someone this morning that kind of culturally, the early morning thing's still quite radical here in the west of Scotland.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a morning
me
person.
neither.
So when I'm left to my own devices and I don't set an alarm, I'm a night person, so I get more productive at night.
Yeah.
In the mornings, I sit around daydreaming and having naps. I
Are
just
you
can't
telling me,
really-
Kathy, that your alarm goes off, you don't leap out of bed onto your yoga mat,
I set several different alarms that go off at 5
that you can't reach from the bed?
Exactly. But when I'm left to my own devices, I wake up around 7:30, 8, and I go to bed around midnight. That's my natural thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I feel comfortable doing. Around between maybe 11 and 12, I'll think about going to bed. And I naturally would wake up between 7:30, 8. That's so this is all what I've been doing for the last 20 years is not natural to me. And I heard on a podcast somewhere that we were evolved as human beings to have different circadian rhythms, I think it is called, because at some point thousands of years ago we had to keep watch when we were in tribes, you know.
Oh, okay.
We had to keep watch, you know, there was always somebody who had to keep watch for, you know, against wild animals and things that might be attacking the camp.
Yeah.
And so people had to take turns, and we were evolved
That
to-
does make
to
a lot
have-
of sense.
to have different kind of hours where you feel so it's you know how sometimes people say it's better to get up early or more productive, and it's better to go to bed early and get up early. It's not necessarily not
Yeah, it
for all of
depends.
us.
Yeah.
Depends who you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I completely understand when people find it difficult to get up early. And also there's that thing of when you've got a full day ahead of work or, you know, family duties, whatever it is that you do, it's tiring, you know?
It is the
And-
whole big practice thing is tiring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do have to go to bed earlier at least to
I
try
think
and
that's
get
something
enough rest.
that I've certainly come to appreciate as well as, like, you know, I've been guilty of thinking that you got to do the big practices every day and that's knackering. And you can sustain it for so long.
Yeah.
But certainly now,
I've not done that for years. So
Yeah.
I've not even tried to sustain like a huge long practice for a long, at least over 5, maybe longer years. And I've never, ever done a 6-day-a-week practice other than when I've been in Mysore or a yoga retreat or something.
No, same.
I've always done 4 or 5, always.
Yeah.
Because I just think you need time off to do other stuff.
Yeah.
You need time off to,
Yeah.
to spend with other people.
It's like, that's the thing I've always said. It's like the yoga's designed to support your life. So you have to have time and energy and be awake enough to have a life.
Yeah.
And especially if you're working as well, because for years I was working full time as well as practicing. And those big practices in the morning, and then about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I would try and not schedule any kind of meetings or important work for 3 or after, because I was literally just like held up by caffeine and sugar. Which isn't great either. No,
you have a dip, don't you? Like an afternoon.
I definitely found kind of 5 days, unless like you say you're away and all you're doing is eating and sleeping and practicing, then absolutely 6 days is sustainable. But 5, and nowadays I do less some days, so I still try and do 5 days, but I do less some days, more other days, and I switch up the kind of proportion between pranayama, the postures, and sitting as well. Some days I do more breathing and sitting than
for sure
moving. I think that comes with time, doesn't it? It's like,
I think, I think it depends on the individual and what you're more inclined to lean towards. But I think for many people, it's kind of good to have a discipline that you just follow, and then you don't have to think about it, and you do it, and you have to do it, and it sort of builds something in you. And then after you know that you are self-sufficient in it, and you've got into your own rhythm, and you understand, and you've put in the hours, and then you can kind of come away from it and go, right, I think I'm going to do, and make more, sensible decisions.
Well, they're
based on how you feel.
Yeah, they're just really well informed decisions. Like, I think about this quite a lot, when I'm thinking about the Ashtanga method and, the kind of framework of the practice, the method of teaching, and like I say, some of the kind of misunderstanding around how that can be a bit rigid and unforgiving and a little bit boring. So when I'm thinking around that, there's a piece for me that there is something about learning the rules to then be able to break them, but making well-informed decisions around that. And I don't mean radically going off piste, but knowing how to intelligently adapt or change or decide on different days. But it's almost like you have to have, to a degree, have gone through some of the stuff first. Before you can make those choices.
Like that, I think. I think discipline for me is really good, because I'm by nature quite chaotic and a bit daydreamy, and so it's good to have something that I just do, and so I like that because it creates order. And I'm not an ordered person, so it's really good for me. But I suppose there's an argument, if you are really already an ordered person and you're too much that way, then it might be too much. Like,
kind of tips over into rigidity.
Maybe.
I mean, because I like a list. I'm naturally quite organised. But I think, and I can see how in some people that might quite easily tip over into that kind of rigid control piece. But actually for me, what I really like about it is having a framework that's almost a container. And like you say, you don't have to think about it too much. And so there's a familiarity and an ease and a comfort and I'm going to say a letting go. I don't mean that it's effortless. You know, there's still effort, you still have to work hard, but there's a degree of comfort and ease in the familiarity of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also interesting how you do the same sort of basic routine.
Yeah.
So you might adapt as you need to, like make it shorter, make it longer, you know, do a bit of this, do a bit of that built based around your framework that you've done for so many years. And then, you know, I'm not saying, as you said, you're not always going to go wildly off piece, but some you do different things, and then sometimes you do the actual thing that the actual sequence, and it's like, oh great, you know, that, I mean, at least that's what I do. I don't do that whole sequence anymore and just do primary on this day, second series, and then all of second series, some of the third series. It's just too much.
Because it used to be quite prescriptive, isn't it? Like, on a certain day you do primary, on a certain day you do this, on a certain day.
I just can't do. I can't do that anymore because, as you know, like now I have to care for my mum. So there's sometimes that as soon as I finish class, I have to rush off. And there's some days where I don't have the time to practice or I don't have the time to practice in the morning because of things that I need to do.
Yeah.
And at first I was struggling with that because, like yourself, prior to that, I was always doing my practice. It was like a ritual.
Yeah.
And even though what I did in my practice might vary a bit and might not be completely traditional, I was always doing it. And then suddenly, like, not doing it felt really strange to me.
Yeah.
But I've learned to let that go now because circumstances have dictated that this is what I need to do right now. And that's fine. I do my practice when I can now.
Yeah. Do what.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's really, really, it's a really important point. Because I do think sometimes within Ashtanga land, the kind of ritualistic aspects of it, while it's important and has value, I think they're a little bit glorified sometimes as well, in that if you don't do that, if you don't practice this at this time in this way, then you're not practicing
doing it properly.
Yeah, there's a, like, if you, like, one of my bugbears is, you know, when you're teaching a morning Mysore class, if you don't get up and practice before your early morning Mysore class, you're not in the right. Oh my God, never. Just never.
Like, people used to. That was a thing, wasn't it?
It was
like,
and
I used to try
thing.
And do this, and there were things I enjoyed about it because I would do this intermittently. I would get up and set my alarm for 3:30 or whatever.
Yeah.
Get up, do some meditation, do my, you know, practice, and then maybe do my finishing postures after I've taught because I couldn't fit them in. All that kind of stuff. But I'm already not a morning person. This is getting into the realms of
middle of the night
ridiculousness for me. I'm not going to get up in the middle of the night. I'm just not going to do it. And it's not healthy for me because when I did do that, I'd be so tired in the day. I just couldn't get anything done at all.
Yeah.
And then you have people saying, well, then you need to take a nap. And it's like, this is getting ridiculous. I'm not working a night shift.
And how does that then fit in with, like, your relationships and friendships and other stuff you might quite like?
Yeah, so I definitely don't practice before. Having said that, there were things that I used to like about practicing before. It was so lovely and quiet.
Yes.
And just like that feeling of having done your practice once is definitely better.
Yeah.
But it's just, I cannot get up at 3:00 in the morning. And then what would inevitably happen I would get up later than I'd planned to, but still early enough to do practice, but I'd only get to do half a practice and I'd be rushing it a bit.
Yeah, that's stressed.
And then you kind of plan to do your finishing postures afterwards, but you don't really do them because you're not warm anymore, and it just didn't really work for me. It didn't work. So, you know, but then maybe for some people it does, and there are advantages to it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not at 3:00 in the morning, but the only reason I get up and practice earlier in the morning is to get it done, because I find if I leave it, the day just runs away, and even with my best intentions, I never quite get back around to it. So that's the only thing that gets me up early.
Yeah. and
to
it
do it.
feels better
Yeah.
to do it in the morning for sure.
Yeah. So I'm just a bit conscious of time now, Kathy. So
Okay.
I thought a really nice place to wrap up would be, what is it that you think keeps you coming back to Ashtanga? Like, so you mentioned injuries and different life challenges, and
Yeah.
you know, having been doing this now for such a long time,
Yeah.
what do you think it is about Ashtanga that keeps you coming back?
I think it's served me quite well so far. So I think that's part of it. You know,
Yeah.
like it keeps me in check. It keeps me checking in on myself. And it's the discipline, because I'm not a very disciplined person. So this has given me a discipline that I follow. And I think even if I've veered a little bit away from it at times, I always come back to it. I think it's that really more than anything else. Breathing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it makes you very conscious of what you're doing with the breath and how important the breath is, which then makes you understand. And when you sit and you do breath work before you do your practice, it completely changes the feeling of it just as you're about to do it. So this kind of understanding of how powerful the breath is, definitely, and a practice that involves the breath, you know, that's a big part of it. It's just like, now, like I said, it's more of a framework that I go back to over and over again, and it just works. I mean, it works. It works to keep you strong. It works to keep you healthy. It works to keep, in the sense that you keep checking in on yourself and you have that time that you allow for yourself, you know, to spend quietly on your own, observing your thoughts, observing your body, observing how you move. It's that, observing how your injuries have got worse or better. You know, I think that's important. Otherwise, you lose sight of yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
So I think it's really that. I mean, like we just said at the beginning, the actual physical postures and the details of it, they're just details. It doesn't really matter, does it? You know, it does matter, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you wanted to switch it up a bit, if the basics are there, the framework is there, you'll still go back to it, you know. And I think like that kind of the sun salutation sequence, the standing sequence, those things are really good fundamental postures that you can work with.
Yeah, foundation of everything.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, because I mean that definitely ties in with something I was thinking about, is definitely the longer I teach and the longer I practice, the more it's about the foundations. It's back to basics, spending time there. That's where the nectar, as Richard Freeman would say, is.
Yeah. It is, and you can't, and it's quite astonishing how 20 years later you still discover new things in the basics.
Yeah.
You still sort of think, oh, what if I did it this way? Or what if I relaxed a bit more here or pushed a bit more here? What if I changed the way I do this? Wow. You still have those kind of sensations, I find.
Yeah, and I suppose as well that's maybe partly about approach. There's a curiosity there. It's not like, I've learned how to do this is how we do it. And we've been doing it the same for all this time now, that it's a constant evolution, isn't it? Just with that curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's just a way to learn and to observe and to take stock. And, you know, you change, your body changes, things change. So you need to keep reassessing, recalibrating. And that's when the basics helps, because you go back to the basics and you reassess. You don't always do things the same way, over a decade, over 2 decades, things change. Everything changes. So you have to keep coming back and looking at it again, coming back, looking at it again. Yeah. So.
Very beautiful place to end. Thank you very much, Kathy.
You're
That was
welcome.
very lovely. And so lovely to see you
Lovely
in
to see
person.
you, I know.
I just love that Kathy's still discovering new things in the practice, even after all these years. You'll find her supporting her daily Mysore community at Ashtanga Yoga Glasgow, so be sure to seek her out. These conversations are unedited, but I'd like to shout out Steph Northcote for smoothing out the wrinkles at the beginning and end of every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can even follow, rate and review to help others find us too. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.